Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. One of the more painful aspects of being estranged from your adult child is that it's a loss you can't exactly grieve, at least not fully. If, heaven forbid, your child had died, at least you could grieve. The task, although horrendous, would be straightforward. People understand death, they would sympathize. Now, I wouldn't wish the death of a child on anyone, but in a way, living with estrangement from a child is equally challenging. There's an ingredient in estrangement that isn't there in a death. There's just no end to it. There's no certainty about what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month. It just goes on and on. In 1999, a book came out called Ambiguous Loss by Pauline Boss. And in that book, she described a couple of situations involving ambiguous loss. The first was when families have somebody who is missing in action in some sort of war zone, where it's not clear whether the person is gone forever or whether they might turn up. In some sense, they're there but not there, and they can never quite grieve. The other situation she talked about was with Alzheimer's patients, dementia patients who are really no longer themselves. And so they too are there, but not there. How can you grieve the loss of somebody who's right in front of you? Boss didn't mention parent-adult-child estrangement, but it's clear to me that this creates a similar circumstance. And Boss recommended two things for people experiencing ambiguous loss that I would like to share with you. The first is holding the ambiguity of the situation consciously in your mind. And the second, finding meaning even in what seems senseless or meaningless. Let's talk about both of these and how practicing them can help you cope from day to day with estrangement. The first technique was holding the ambiguity of the situation consciously in your mind. That means recognizing the pain of uncertainty. We humans hate uncertainty. We're always looking to put things to bed, to know what they are, what they mean, and when they end. The pain of uncertainty is real, and that's what you are living with from day to day. Recognize also the tension between despair versus hope. I've had parents consult with me and tell me, it hurts too much sometimes to hope, and so I have none. Once you've recognized the difficulty of your situation, cultivate compassion for the person experiencing this terrible loss. And that's you. Self-compassion is not optional for people in your shoes. So that's holding the ambiguity of the situation consciously in your mind. The second activity Boss recommended in her book was finding meaning even in what seems senseless or meaningless. I bet you're already doing that. This estrangement by your child already means something to you, but you might want to figure out what you're already thinking it means and decide consciously whether that's really what it means. Do you view this as a personal failure? A rejection that feels like part of a pattern, a punishment, or something else? So much of what makes estrangement from your child so painful is the meaning that you assign to it. Therefore, it's important to recognize the meaning that you have assigned to it. And I'd like to offer you some alternative meanings for the estrangement, ones that might feel better and actually be more factual than emotional. Meaning number 1. Your child needs room for his or her personal development. As a parent, you are inherently uninteresting to a young adult who's entirely focused on building his or her own life. The estrangement may be largely motivated by your child's simply being focused elsewhere. That's meaning number 1. Meaning number 2, There is something about the relationship between you and your child, something in the way you interact with each other, that your child has for some time found distressing or painful enough to want to create distance. It may be something that happens between you that you're not even aware of, but that you have tons of control over should you become aware of what it is and decide to do something about it. Common examples are criticism, over-involvement, and role reversal, where the child feels too responsible for the parent's well-being. So those are just a few examples of relationship dynamics that can cause distress to an adult child without the parent being aware of it. You might think, well, if I were criticizing my child, I would know about that. But the criticism is funny because it really is in the eye of the beholder. You might say something that has absolutely no critical component at all, and your child might be just of a mind to take that personally. The takeaway here is, rather than punishing you or rejecting you or being intentionally mean to you, your child may actually be protecting herself from the distress that this relationship dynamic causes. And if you can address the cause or causes, your child may no longer find it necessary to keep that distance. In the first case, where estrangement is motivated by a phase of development and a need for independence, your child just needs you to take a step back and let him grow outside the confines of the family. Even though you might want to continue to have a close and loving, regular contact kind of relationship, he just might need a little bit more space. And in the second case, where there are relationship dynamics at play that are not working for your child, you have tons of power to make positive changes and help them enjoy the relationship as much as you do. Or maybe you both have been suffering from the dynamics and you could both benefit from changes. And, of course, both meanings might be true. That is, your child could need more space just for himself, and that could also be helped along by the fact that he finds something upsetting in your relationship. I hope these alternative meanings are less damaging to your self-esteem. To summarize, remember that you are experiencing an ambiguous loss, and that's very hard to deal with. You have far less social support than a parent whose child actually dies, but you have to live every day with a loss that you can't grieve. And you also don't have your child in your life. So hold that thought consciously in your mind and have compassion for the person who is experiencing this loss. Secondly, think about the meaning of this estrangement between you. And consider that it's not about you being a failure or the worst parent ever, or your child punishing you for something that other parents get forgiven for all the time. It might simply mean that your child needs more room to be himself or herself, or there's something in the way the two of you interact that he or she is protecting from, or both. Neither scenario is the end of the world. Most estrangements are temporary. There are factors that lead to healing, growth, and change with the passage of time, and these are operating on your child even while you sleep. So the more you can spend the time you have really understanding yourself and your feelings and your motivations and continuing to grow as a person, the easier it will be to understand the meaning of what happens between you and your child and to attend to anything in your power to address. Until next time, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.